Thanks for joining us once again. Today we focus on the Cybertruck, as you can see behind me. The reason we wanted to focus on it is that about 40% of everything going on for Tesla currently is kind of concentrated on the arrivals of the Cybertruck. We wanted to take a deeper look at it, and we'll be doing so once a week into its introduction in July and then the start of sales in September. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. We also want to thank our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the show, would like some better information on investing and trading, please join us on Patreon. So I wanted to take a look perhaps at a different angle at the Cybertruck today. So there's been some data that's popped up that you should be aware of. The number one piece of data that popped up that's not commonly known is there's a guy named Steve Wesley, a former board member of Tesla, who currently runs a fund at the Wesley Group that's focused on investing in EV and sort of sustainable planetary things like solar, etc. So what Steve had to say is a number of things that I thought were impressive. The two things that I thought were most impressive was, number one, he was really focused on the fact that Tesla's actually stopped taking orders for the Cybertruck and currently has 1.5 million orders. What he indicated is even if you lose 30% of that, that's still 1 million vehicles that'll be sold. What he further indicated is that there is between September and December of this year, there's a forecast of somewhere between 25 and 40,000 Cybertrucks to be sold, and that as we head into next year, the expectation is that there'll be about 250 of those 50,000 of those vehicles built and sold. So I heard those numbers, saw those numbers. That's a closer to the origin entity that may understand better what's going on, and that's awesome. Those are awesome numbers, and they would add nicely. He further concluded that as the Cybertruck finds its space, the biggest non-beneficiary of this will be the Ford F-150, which has been selling 650,000 vehicles a year. So one should expect that the stock price of Ford may dip on this as the Cybertruck takes up sales. So there's a concept in economics called marginal utility, which is kind of one of the angles I'd like to focus on the Cybertruck on today. So in the case of this vehicle, I want to deviate and come back to the fact that about 20 years ago, I bought a Volvo Wagon. And at that age, late 20s is the time when everyone is buying sports cars, etc. But I really liked the versatility of that vehicle in terms of runs to Home Depot, delivery boxes to different places I needed to do, and then just something nice you could drive around when not doing those other things. So what I kept doing for about a 3 or 4 year period was checking in the classifieds to figure out, well, wait a second, was it a good purchase? And what I found fascinating is that I kept watching the one ads, if you will, on the 850 turbo wagon from Volvo, and for the first 3 years, I saw none available. But after a while, you started seeing a few become available down the road. And so I was really intrigued by the fact that there are plenty of sports cars, etc., and even super luxury cars that were seeing huge declines in their values over time and could be easily had coming off leases, etc. But there are very few of those Volvo wagons that were available. So if we fast forward to the Cybertruck in this case and take a look at sort of the marginal utility of the Cybertruck, one of the things I was really fascinated by is in Silicon Valley, what you'll notice from a number of technologies is that anytime somebody brings something forward, it's typically not the equivalent of what folks have been seeing in the past. So, for example, think about Google using that for search versus using a telephone book. The whole idea is to bring forward innovation that's unique, that causes people to shift dramatically from what they're currently doing. So clearly, what are some of the marginal utility elements that arrive as we get the Cybertruck entering? Number one, obviously we're going electric. Number two, obviously we're in a pickup format, which is more of a design as a working truck, if you will, for folks that are out in construction sites or have to move materials around. That's one of the sort of thrust areas that this is being used for. So I'm intrigued by the fact that when the vehicle arrived, I was like, ugh, it doesn't fit what we're traditionally used to seeing. But there's also the issue is, if it is what we're traditionally used to seeing, why would anybody buy it? And hence, it's got a lot of orders in there. So one of the question marks that I've had about the Cybertruck that I think is solved by the nature of our talk today is the higher the marginal utility is, the more it retains value and people are willing to pay more for it. So one example I'd like to use is your cell phone. In the old days when you couldn't search the internet with it and it was simply a phone, there's a certain number of people who were willing to pay for that phone. And they would have the rest of their functionality on their computers and pay 3 or 4 times more for their computers. Well, what happened? Well, the phone morphed into a fairly effective computer, particularly surfing the web. So now we have an interesting situation where, as people were able to get a lot more utility across a number of different functions, email, text, regular phone, being able to read or quickly have information at disposal without having to lug a computer with you. As you had all of that functionality arrive, there's willingness to pay more. Now, why is that important here? It's my belief that because the Cybertruck requires, in essence, double the amount of steel that Tesla doesn't use steel necessarily for its the skin of its vehicles. They actually use the aluminum because they're trying to lower the amount of weight that they're carrying around, which gives it better range. So the issue that comes up with the Cybertruck is, as we've gone to this bulletproof, both glass and exterior, we now have a heavier vehicle which requires higher gauges of steel. So now we have this issue lurking of, well, wait a second, you've got to pour all this extra steel in. All that extra steel costs you more money. And so what I'm expecting to happen is, it was hoped that this vehicle would end up being in the 60 to 80,000 range theoretically. But I think that the cost of that steel is going to push the vehicle to an average of maybe 100K. And the challenge is that as the price of a vehicle rises, the number of people that can afford it actually declines or can fit it in their budget. So what I think is exciting and why I wanted to do a show about marginal utility is, if this vehicle can be more than one vehicle, the chances are better that people can fit it in their budgets, because instead of having 2 vehicles, you're relying on one vehicle to do 2 functions or 3 functions. So in this case, obviously the regular transportation, number of seats allows you to carry a full family. They have 2 rows of seats behind 2 passenger in front. So theoretically, you have 8 people that can travel in it. And then once you get beyond that, you have the functionality of a pickup truck, as we've discussed. But the other one that Sandy Monroe pointed out actually is, what his plan was is to get his Cybertruck and park in an area where there are a lot of deer that he can shoot, and just go to sleep using the heater from the electric, and simply wake up and be able to hunt whatever is in that area, while the entities he's hunting aren't aware that he's there. So yes, bottom line is this is going to be a hunter's paradise, is what the suggestion is, as another marginal utility of this vehicle. He's currently using a Rubicon from Chrysler and Jeep, and so this is going to be a great entity for him to do that with. Another thing I really enjoy right now is there's a lot of videos associated with people doing outdoor camping, and doing so in cars or vans that have been converted, etc. And that's the thing that I think is going to happen a lot with the Tesla Cybertruck, is figure out a way to fully convert it so that you can move around with it as an RV. So if you think about it, there are all these people who have these nice RVs outside their homes. When they go on trips, they're using, but otherwise it's sitting there gathering dust, etc. And I think if you can modify your Cybertruck to allow it to, in essence, become your camper, you now have more utility out of that vehicle. So now the money that would have gone into a traveling trailer, etc., or a large motorhome type vehicle, you can skip that and have those funds come back into the Cybertruck. So globally, what we're suggesting here is that what we're headed for with the Cybertruck was initially the functionality that you would expect just from an SUV. But what I think is going to happen, because of how you can seal off the back and instantly have a living space that's not the norm for the usual pickup truck, I think this ends up being a real boom and a boon for all those people who want to move around and enjoy the outdoors, as another way the vehicle could be used. And I think it's going to become an entity of choice for that group. So I'm pleased to sort of discuss this, because I guess my biggest concern about the success of the vehicle is the fewer ways you can use it, the lower the chance that people can afford to buy it and therefore put it to work. And I really think what it's going to force is that there are a lot of other entities, particularly Ford, that's going to have to modify how their vehicles are structured to embrace the functionality that this Cybertruck represents. So for those of you who've already put your funds in, congrats. You may not want to get rid of it right away, because I think what we're going to see is a spike in value because of the long lines that it'll take for other people to get it. And therefore, if you pick up your vehicle, I think you're going to pick up extra dollars above initial cost in the form of people who are too far down the line or never got on the line, that have now realized that this is a really great vehicle that's worth the time and money to put some cash into. So that ends our sort of Cybertruck discussion for today. Next, we'd like to move on to our health tips of the day, as usual. So I wanted to remind you, one of the shows, I used to do research in undergrad on sleep research. And I wanted to encourage you to try to maintain the same sleep and wake schedule for a couple of weeks, even on weekends, because it'll enable you to sort of get into what's called a circadian rhythm that's consistent with a healthier life process. So the other addition I would make to that is to consider maybe a half-hour nap, even if you have to use an alarm between noon and 3 p.m., sometime in that range, between 15 minutes and a half hour. The reason is that timing coordinates with the 12 a.m. to 3 a.m. period, which is the typical deep sleep period for most people. So if you add a nap in that afternoon, you'll find that you'll be a lot more effective the rest of the day from that point on. At any rate, we want to thank you for taking time out to join us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Tschüss, au revoir, lahitro, hoda hafez, da ni hao ma. And in Jamaica, we say, no respect, walk good mat. Thanks for joining us. Have a great day, and bye for now.